The oxygen mask swayed from the cockpit ceiling like a small yellow flag that didn't belong there. Captain Mills had flown for 30 years, and he had never reached for emergency oxygen at this altitude. Tonight, his hands shook anyway, and the fuel readouts on the panel didn't just look wrong. They looked impossible. Behind him, in the softly lit cabin, 8-year-old Sophie Gray sat strapped into a leather seat. Her eyes were closed, her breaths thin and uneven, as if the air itself had become heavy. A portable medical monitor blinked warnings in steady, unforgiving beats. David Gray knelt beside his daughter, trying to keep his voice calm as he pressed the intercom. "Captain Mills, we need to land right now," he said. Sophie isn't responding. Her pulse is fading. No answer came back. At first, David thought the speaker had failed until he heard something worse than static. A dull thud from the cockpit, then a long empty silence that sounded like a machine deciding it didn't need a human anymore. Emma Cole sat in the co-pilot seat, frozen for half a second. She watched her father's fingers slip off the controls like they were letting go of a rope. The autopilot tone chirped once, steady and emotionless, and the jet kept moving forward. Emma swallowed hard, then forced her hands to do what her fear begged them not to do. She checked his breathing, tapped his shoulder, called his name twice. Captain Mills didn't wake. Emma's throat tightened, but her mind snapped into a familiar kind of focus. She had spent years inside flight simulators, memorizing procedures, until they felt like music. She had also logged real cockpit time with her father on short training flights, learning checklists the honest way. Still, a simulator had never smelled like warm electronics and real sweat, and it had never carried a child turning blue in the cabin. Some of you watching from big cities know the specific dread of an emergency in the air, when help is everywhere below you but impossibly far away. Emma leaned toward the intercom, keeping her voice low so it wouldn't crack. "Mr. Gray," she said, "my father is unconscious. I'm going to keep the aircraft stable, but I need to check Sophie." David's face tightened with fear, not doubt. "Tell me what you need," he said. Emma didn't waste the moment. "Stay with her," she said, "and bring me anything she's taken today." She moved fast down the aisle, and the cabin lights made Sophie's face look pale as paper. The blue at her lips was spreading like a bruise that didn't need impact. Emma knelt, found Sophie's pulse, and felt how thin it was. "Has she taken anything new today?" Emma asked. "Any medication, supplement, anything at all?" David fumbled through Sophie's travel bag with clumsy urgency. "She started a prescribed immune supplement this morning," he said. "Dr. Harrison said it was safe." He held out a small bottle, the label slightly crooked. Emma read it once, then again, because her brain didn't want to believe the numbers. The dosage printed there was adult level, and beside the clinic name there was one tiny character that looked off, so small it could be a printing flaw, or nothing at all. Emma noted it and moved on, because Sophie was still sinking, and time was still cruel. "We need ground medical guidance," Emma said, "and we need to descend." David's jaw clenched. "My company builds avionics," he said. "I understand systems." Emma kept her eyes on Sophie. "Then understand this," she said softly. "Something here was set in motion on purpose." David didn't answer, and his silence felt like a door half closed. Emma secured the oxygen mask from the cabin kit over Sophie's face and watched for the slightest improvement. Then she stood and went back to the cockpit, because she couldn't save one life while losing the other two. Like every YouTube channel, our channel needs support. If you want to support our channel, please click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you in advance for your support. The jet was still on autopilot, but the navigation line had drifted. Fuel pressure numbers were falling in steps, like a countdown. Emma strapped in, took a breath, and keyed the radio with hands that were steadier than she felt. "Atlanta Center, this is November 7-8 Charlie," she said. "Pilot incapacitation. Medical emergency with a child passenger. Request immediate assistance." There was a pause, and then a voice that sounded suddenly alert. "November 7-8 Charlie, say who's speaking." Emma glanced at her father's slack posture. "This is Emma Cole," she said. "I'm in the right seat. I'm not a licensed pilot. I'm the only conscious person at the controls." The frequency went quiet for one dangerous beat. Then the controller's tone changed into something firm and procedural. Copy, Emma. We are declaring an emergency. Keep the autopilot engaged. We'll give you step-by-step vectors and a safe descent. David hovered behind her, gripping the seat back. He looked at the panel, then at Emma, as if his mind was searching for an adult who could step in. When no one did, he understood the truth he'd been avoiding. Tonight, the teenager was the captain. Emma started the descent under instruction, following the flight director like it was a lifeline. The cabin altitude stayed stable, but the engines didn't. Temperature crept upward in a slow, angry climb. A warning flashed for a fuel filter fault that shouldn't have happened mid-flight. David leaned in and tapped the display. "That's not random," he said. "It doesn't behave like wear. It behaves like damage." Emma's eyes sharpened. "You mean sabotage," she said. David swallowed. He didn't want to say yes, because yes meant someone wanted his daughter dead. Before he could answer, a second warning lit up, then a third, and the cockpit filled with alarms that didn't care about denial. The radio crackled again. "Emma, we have medical on standby to advise," Atlanta Center said. "Describe the child's condition." Emma relayed Sophie's symptoms in clean, simple phrases. The ground physician asked questions, then gave guidance that sounded like calm water over stones. "Keep the child warm. Maintain oxygen support. Monitor breathing and responsiveness. Do not force anything." Emma repeated the instructions to David, and he nodded, relieved to have something clear to do. He rushed back to Sophie, holding her hand, talking to her like she could hear him through the fog. Emma stayed in the cockpit, watching the numbers fall. Then the cabin speaker chimed. A voice came through that didn't belong to any of them. "Attention passengers," it said, smooth and cold. "We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain seated." Emma's blood went ice. There was no flight attendant on board. David's face appeared at the doorway, drained of color. "That system is internal," he whispered. "Nobody outside should have access." Emma stared at the comms panel. "Someone is in our network," she said. "Someone wants us quiet." Miles away, someone watched their altitude on a private screen. A cursor hovered over a button labeled with a harmless word, as if harm needed polite names. And when Emma corrected the heading back towards safety, the unseen watcher adjusted again, patient and angry. Atlanta Center kept talking, but the hack had changed something else. The heading began to drift again, as if the jet were gently being pushed off course. Emma fought it with small inputs, resisting the pull like a person refusing to be led into darkness. "Emma," the controller said, "your track is deviating. Confirm you're holding assigned heading." "I'm trying," Emma answered. "The aircraft is fighting me." David returned, breathless. "Sophie is slightly better with oxygen," he said, "but her pulse is still weak." Emma nodded without looking away from the instruments. "Tell her she's landing soon," Emma said. "Tell her she's coming back. If you've ever had to stay calm for someone you love, tap like right now." Another warning blared. Then the left engine surged once like a cough and rolled back. The aircraft shuddered, and Emma's body reacted before her fear did. "Engine failure," she said into the radio. "Left engine is out." "Copy," Atlanta Center replied instantly. "Maintain airspeed. You're cleared direct to the nearest runway. Emergency vehicles are rolling." David grabbed the checklist binder from the side pocket with trembling hands. "I can read it," he offered. "Just tell me what pace you need." Yes," Emma said. "Read it exactly as written." David swallowed hard and began, voice steadying as he focused. They descended through thin clouds, Atlanta growing from a map into a place with lights and roads and consequences. The runway assignment came through, crisp and urgent. Emma repeated it aloud, anchoring herself in the words. In the cabin, Sophie made a small sound, a breath that sounded more present than before. David exhaled, and for a moment, hope sat beside terror like they were forced to share a seat. Then he remembered something. He ran to his briefcase, dug inside, and found a letter he had dismissed 3 days earlier as a bitter bluff. "Your family will pay for what you did to mine." Signed, Marcus Webb. David stared at the signature until the ink seemed to bleed. He had forced Webb out of Gray Aviation after an audit, and he had told himself revenge was a story for smaller men. Now it was a story at 30,000 feet. David brought the letter to Emma, voice tight. I ignored this, he admitted. I told myself it was noise. Emma's eyes flicked over the page, then back to the panel. That noise almost became a funeral, she said. No more ignoring. On final approach, the jet was quieter than it should be. The remaining engine worked, but it sounded strained, as if swallowing smoke. Emma followed the controller's talk down like a promise she couldn't afford to break. Good, Atlanta Center said. You're lined up. Keep the nose where it is. You're doing fine. Emma didn't feel fine. She felt like a wire holding 3 lives over a drop. And then at the worst possible moment, the right engine coughed. Once. Twice. Then the thrust dropped away like a floor. The cabin went eerily silent, replaced by the raw rush of wind. Emma's heart hammered, but her hands stayed measured. Both engines are out, she said. We're gliding. Atlanta Center didn't panic. Copy, the controller said. You have the runway. You have the distance. Keep your speed. Don't chase the glide. Emma stared at the runway ahead. From this angle, it looked too small, like a promise the world couldn't keep. Fire trucks lined the edges like bright toys. Ambulance lights flashed in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat trying to catch up. David moved between cockpit and cabin, repeating the physician's guidance, keeping Sophie calm with his voice. He had spent his life buying solutions. Now he was learning to be one. The aircraft sank through the last 1,000 feet. Emma adjusted her pitch by fractions, listening to the wind, reading the instruments like a language she had studied in secret. She could feel the jet's weight, the inertia, the reluctant fall. Then a new voice cut into the radio. Not Atlanta Center. Not the medical team. Emma Cole, the voice said, smooth and intimate. This is Dr. Harrison. You are not qualified to provide medical care. Stop what you're doing. Emma's stomach turned. David froze in the doorway, eyes wide with recognition. Dr. Harrison was not supposed to be anywhere near their frequency. Dr. Harrison, Emma replied, keeping her tone controlled. You're interfering with an active emergency, Jen. The doctor's voice stayed calm, as if calm made him right. The child's condition is delicate, he said. Any mistakes will be on you. Emma felt anger rise, hot and clean. You're right about one thing, she said. It's delicate. That's why the licensed ground team is guiding us. Atlanta Center cut back in sharp now. November 7-8 Charlie. Disregard unauthorized transmission, the controller ordered. Continue current protocol. Emma's fingers tightened on the yoke. Copy, she said. Continuing. The runway filled the windshield. The jet was fast, too fast for comfort, but slow enough to die before it reached the numbers. Emma made a choice that didn't exist in her trophies or her dreams. She held her speed, aimed for the longest pavement, and trusted gravity like a brutal instructor. At the last moment, she eased back. The main gear hit hard. The cabin jolted, and Sophie cried out, small, alive, furious at the world, for the first time in an hour. The aircraft bounced once, then settled, tires screaming, rolling straight down the center line. Emma didn't breathe until she saw the end of the runway coming and knew they would stop before it. Emergency vehicles surrounded the jet before it fully slowed. Doors opened. Voices flooded in. Warm hands took over. Paramedics reached Sophie first, then Captain Mills, then David. Sophie was conscious, oxygen in place, eyes blinking like a person returning from deep water. Captain Mills stirred, coughing, his eyelids fluttering as if waking from poison. A medic pulled Emma aside, looking her up and down. How old are you? He asked. 17, she said. His expression tightened with disbelief, and it landed like a dismissal. She was too tired to fight. Then Sophie's small voice carried down the aisle. She saved me, Sophie said, pointing at Emma with a trembling finger. She did. The medic's face changed. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and his apology mattered. Later that night, after the adrenaline burned off, an air traffic manager found Emma in a quiet hospital hallway. He looked like a man who hadn't blinked in hours. When you said you weren't licensed, he admitted. My controller hesitated for a second. He asked for confirmation. We lost time. Emma felt the weight of that second like a stone. The manager's voice broke with regret. We're changing our training, he said. If the voice has the code and the emergency is real, we act first. No one should have to earn help with credentials. Emma nodded, and the nod felt like a handshake with the future. At dawn, federal investigators arrived before David had even finished signing intake forms. The jet was impounded before sunrise. Fuel samples were taken, filters bagged, avionics logs copied, radio records pulled. David tried to explain Marcus Webb, the letter, the sabotage. One investigator listened, then said something that made David's skin prickle. "We traced an unauthorized access point in the aircraft network," she said. "Someone tried to steer you away from the airport." David's voice cracked. "So it was real," he whispered, as if part of him still needed permission to accept it. 48 hours later, the truth snapped into place like a lock turning. The prescription label hadn't been printed by the legitimate pharmacy at all. That one tiny wrong character, so easy to miss, matched a batch of counterfeit labels seized in an unrelated investigation. A federal agent held the evidence up to David like it was a mirror. "Your daughter's medication instructions were altered," she said. "Deliberately." David shut his eyes. He had dismissed the bottle as routine. He had trusted a doctor because trust was easier than vigilance. Now the cost of that ease felt enormous. Marcus Webb was arrested first, pulled from a penthouse apartment where he had been watching the news feed like it was entertainment. He didn't deny writing the letter. He didn't even deny wanting David to suffer. "I wanted him powerless," Webb said, voice flat in the interrogation video. "The way he made me." Dr. Harrison was arrested next, escorted from his clinic with cameras flashing and patients staring. He tried to sound clinical as he spoke, like clinical meant innocent. "The protocol would have worked at altitude," he said coldly. "The symptoms would look natural. The crash would erase questions. But the crash didn't happen. And the small mistake on the counterfeit label did what their money and planning couldn't. It told investigators exactly where to look and who had touched the truth." Captain Mills recovered fully after doctors found traces of a chemical irritant in the cockpit air filter system. He cried when he woke and heard what Emma had done. Not because he was weak, because he understood the weight she had carried while he couldn't. Sophie recovered quickly too. Her blood work showed no lasting harm, and her appetite returned with surprising speed. On the second day, she asked for pancakes and extra syrup, and the nurses laughed like they needed the sound. When Emma visited, Sophie held her hand with a fierce kind of gratitude. "You saved my life twice," Sophie said. "Once from the bad medicine, once from the broken airplane." Emma tried to smile. "You helped," Emma told her. "You held on." David stood by the window, watching the two of them, and something in him shifted. He had always believed strength lived in boardrooms, in contracts, in leverage. Now he had seen strength in a teenager's steady hands and a child's stubborn breathing. A week later, David asked Emma to meet him in a quiet conference room at the hospital. No cameras, no assistants, no ceremony. Just a man who owed his life, trying to speak like a human. "I can't repay what you did," David said, "but I can refuse to waste it." Emma's shoulders tensed, expecting a speech. David surprised her by keeping it simple. "I want to fund your flight training," he said, "and your medical education, if you still want that path. No strings, no headlines." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "My dream is to fly medical missions," she admitted. "To be useful when time matters." David nodded. "Then let's make that usefulness bigger than one night," he said. 6 months later, the Gray Aviation Safety Institute opened its doors. It wasn't a monument to David's wealth. It was a response to a truth he had learned the hard way. Emergencies don't care who you are. The institute trained young pilots to think clearly under pressure and to coordinate with medical professionals in flight. It also trained ground teams to take unorthodox distress calls seriously, because the voice asking for help might not sound like a captain. Emma became one of the program's youngest instructors, not because she wanted fame, because she remembered the first seconds in that cockpit when everyone's lives depended on someone refusing to freeze. Sophie's name appeared on the other wing of the project. The Sophie Gray Foundation for Child Medical Safety launched with a mission to reduce medication errors and improve rapid response for pediatric emergencies. Sophie, now 9, spoke at the first event, clutching a note card with both hands. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "Emma saved me because she knew what to do," Sophie said. I think everyone should learn how to help, even kids. The room went quiet, then warm. Captain Mills stood in the back, eyes wet, hand over his heart. David watched Sophie and realized something painful and hopeful at the same time. The best legacy wasn't a company. It was a culture. A culture that refused to dismiss the child, the underdog, the unlicensed voice on the radio. Because sometimes that voice is the only reason anyone survives. And sometimes the difference between tragedy and rescue is one person deciding to stay steady when everything else falls apart. How would you rate this story out of 10? We are curious about your feedback. Disclaimer: this is a dramatization inspired by real events and people. Some details have been changed. This is not medical or legal advice.